Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 2 of Git Good, a short live stream series and VODs to assist players in lower ranks to understand common mistakes they could be making and lower their chances of advancing. With me tonight, we have the same three fantastic Premier Division players to help us, Altivian, Coffee, and Magic Gnome. And as well as that, a special international tank god himself, Robodoba. Welcome everyone, how are we?
Doing good.
Pretty good.
Excited to be back.
Rob, welcome. How's the EU been treating you? I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Oh, hello.
Hello, team.
Hello.
Um, sorry about that. Forgive me if I'm a little bit groggy. It's quite early in the morning here. But
What time is
happy
it
to
there
be
at the
here
moment?
chatting with. It is just hit 8 a.m. So I'm not used to being up this early, but I'm excited to chat with some ANZ people. It's been a while.
It's been a long time, and I'm sure that the people watching will be excited to hear from you and what you have to say about tanking, which is what this episode is about, as you can see from the title. Tanking.
You need to
So,
come out with the furniture.
let's just ask Rob first up. Rob, tanking, what would you, like, if you could nut it down into a few simple words, what would you explain about tanking? How important is it, etc.?
I guess tanks are sort of the carry of hots.
Blank that just disappeared.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I'm sorry. The stream just not stream. The Discord just crashed for 2 seconds, but it looks like we'll be back up in just a moment.
Okay.
It should be back up in. Sorry guys, I didn't mean to lose you. There we go. We're all back. It didn't actually change too much. Welcome back. Sorry. Continue, Rob. Where were we?
I was just saying that tank, I think, is the carry position of HOTS. You have to pretty much be the front line of your team. You have to decide when to engage, when to disengage, all of that kind of stuff. So very important role to get right.
Fair enough. We've got a few points that we wanted to talk about. We've got a couple other tank players here that do Premier. Positioning was the first one. I'm going to quickly chuck up a video. The video I'm going to play is just a team fight from one of my previous games. And I just want you guys to have a watch and see what you think in regards to how it all played out and stuff like that. Alright, so have a look at this. Give me 2 seconds, and there's no sound on this, so I'm going to start it again. But if you have a look, I'm going to loop it, so it'll start it over and over again. But watch where the tank is and what the positioning is on this team fight here. Having a look at our lovely squishies in the bottom there getting absolutely destroyed. And what the tanks are doing. While you guys are watching, Rob, Altivian, Magic, Coffee, have a look and tell me, like, you can talk about it while it's happening if you want. Tell us what you're noticing.
The main thing I'm seeing is like Kel'Thuzad's trying to go for the wave when an objective's up, but no one's with him. So that's almost never a good idea. Because if no one's with you, you've got no vision of the vents nearby or where they are in general. So someone can just come out and kill you, as that is a good example of. The ETC up the top, I guess, was fine because his squishies weren't going for the wave at the time. But yeah, Kel'Thuzad should be way closer to his tank.
I feel a bit bad for the ETC in this clip, purely because he's a bot for the first half of the clip. But
Yeah.
when he gets back and is a human, it looks like he does a good.
I feel like another thing is like we'll probably go over this later, but I guess I can't really speak for in a tank perspective, but as an assassin's perspective, that Arthas and KT were very disjointed. So in terms of Arthas is moving around very unpredictably and using his route in the exact same fashion, which I guess can make it really hard to follow up. So that was kind of what I saw a lot of. Scary.
Yeah, I didn't realize how long this clip actually was because I stopped it when they got the Punisher, and that's when I restarted there. So you'll see it restarting now. I'm just watching how far up Vanilla Bear is for one, but then how far away the tanks are. Arthas isn't even there yet.
Muradin should definitely be next to the Kel'Thuzad at pretty much all stages. of the game.
Especially considering there's a Valera that's going to be targeting that back line. To have the tank so far up with no protection in the back line. Arthas hadn't even got to the fight yet, so...
Maybe some other basic things is like using your abilities so they actually have an effect. Like I think Mirrodin has thrown just straight like 2 Qs at like a Raynor who's nowhere near his assassins, no one can follow up kind of deal. It's like cool, you get the stack, but I mean, nothing happens.
He doesn't even get a stack. He hasn't done the quest at 1. Oh, it's level 6, so he won't have finished his baseline quest. Even still. If you haven't done the quest, you really need to get value out of your keys.
Save it for the Valera or something, right?
Yeah. It's also faster to stack, getting kills with it.
Yeah.
So saving it for like when it's going to kill someone, or like get them close to kill. Doesn't need to be the kill shot.
I'm going to leave the clip playing on repeat at the top there so that if anyone wants to watch and have a look and we can talk about things and we can use some of the points we're talking about to explain what they're doing up there. But a couple of things you mentioned were the positioning, not just of the tanks but of the assassin itself. Kale Thazard was a bit too far up.
There's always 2 points to that, isn't there? Because there's the tank needs to be close to Kel'Thuzad, but also there's a lot of vision that the red team didn't have there. Like they had no idea where Valera was at the time.
Yep.
And Valera just got behind the Kel'Thuzad and killed him.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, only because we had the replay mode, but she'd been sitting in that bush just below where Kel'Thuzad was, or below where they are now, rather, for a good 30, 40 seconds before the team fight broke out.
So that's one thing the tank needs to try and find out for the team, because the team can't, like, Kel'Thuzad can't be checking these bushes and so on and so forth. Tanks need to be trying to get the vision for their assassins, and the assassins need to try and use that vision. So he saw the Punisher area, like he had vision of that area, he would have known where the other team was in that area. But Kel'Thuzad, instead of using that vision, went down instead of up.
Yeah.
Which becomes a problem. So it's on both sides, but Mirrodin should still be trying to stay near the Kel'Thuzad, in my opinion. So
I'd say in general, if you have a setup like Mirrodin Arthas, then I think it's okay for Mirrodin to like posture up aggressively, because theoretically, if he holds one side, then the Arthas can be possibly holding another, where Valera could flank. But I think in this clip though, Arthas wasn't there right for the start of the fight.
No, he came in after
general
Kel'Thuzad died.
Yeah, in general as a team, like if you're contesting a shrine on Infernal Shrines, you probably have to, before you posture up so aggressively like that, you have to kind of be together.
Have a full 5 stack there. In regard to anchoring, I actually haven't got any clips of anchoring. But as for people that don't understand the terminology, what would you, how easily would you, what was the easiest way to describe anchoring?
Well, I guess so. Anchoring on an objective could be a good, like, a bit of a way to use it. So, for example, if you gain some sort of space for your team by pushing up aggressively as the Mirrodin and their, say, Raynor backs up, you want to try and like hold that space and not give it away. So, like, either your team can rotate safely, your team can get in more aggressive positions or safer positions or things like that. So that'll be probably just like if you gain an area, you anchor there and you make sure you hold area, because one person can be scary for, because fog of war. So playing a bit of a mental game with that as well.
Yeah, so in this case, what Rob was saying before was that Mirrodin would be anchoring the top, and then the Arthas theoretically would be anchoring the bottom or the lane itself. So then the Kel'Thuzad could go up in that position that he was.
Yeah, and it doesn't.
And by anchoring both sides, the Valera wouldn't be a problem all of a sudden. Other ways are when you're doing camps, having a tank in a bush, if you know it's one that they can contest. If they can't contest it in the first place, there's no point anchoring, you're just delaying getting the camp.
Yeah.
But if they can contest it, then being a little bit further away from the camps, then you can see if someone's coming, is a great way of giving your team the information they need to survive.
Not only that, if you're stuck in a bush anchoring, you're also able to get the jump on them if they do try and contest. You can easily land your skill shots. You can zone them away, use knockback, whatever, just to make sure your team has enough time to get for camp in the first place. Make them not even able to contest a point.
Big little well, a big game of information basically. So whether you get the jump on them because you can see them and they can't see you, or something like that because of your anchoring, or you play with numbers or anything like that. So that's always important.
Yeah, I mean, in this particular instance, they're fighting 4v5 to start with, so they're already down in numbers. But in terms of anchoring for, say, an objective on Infernal Shrines, if your team's on the shrine, you'd have, say, the Muradin in one of the bushes and the Arthas in one of the other bushes while your team is all on there. That way you've got all the vision, just in case Valera does try to come around for a flank. Arthas can catch that. And as you were saying, so if their team are coming up to invade from the normal side, from their side, then you've got the ability to land those skill shots and they have the blind information, whereas you have all the information. In terms of team fights, so anchoring's part of it. That's the information side of it. What would you say about setting up? So plays and kills and fights and stuff like that. Anchoring's a good start to setting up those. What other things would you keep in mind as a lower ranked player?
Biggest one is being there, for sure.
Yeah, not like the Arthas, right?
Yeah, like just what the artists and the rest of the team, so everyone's in on it together, really. Like everybody needs to know where your teammates are at all times, basically. When you're going to fight, at least, like you need to know that your team's behind you if you're the tank. If you're an assassin, you need to know your tanks are there. Like everybody just needs to know that your team can do whatever they're doing based on their positioning.
Absolutely, like even if you get the gold APOC combo, you stand them against the wall, they get stunned, it's a perfect CC chain. It doesn't matter if you don't have your damage there to follow up on you and actually kill them. You're just running in so and dying.
I think so much of it is just about game knowledge. Like I was saying earlier, tank is a role where you probably will be leading your team just in terms of like assassins will just subconsciously they'll follow the tank. So you just have to decide like when should we actually walk up? Like when do we actually walk up and contest something? When do we look for a fight? And all that kind of stuff. Like your actual decision making in tank is what will kind of determine your success, I guess. Like more so than mechanics, at least at first, at least until you play at a very high level.
Mm.
With that as well, it's sort of like, so some things to look for then is how to decide whether or not you should walk up and make those decisions is the, like Magic Num said, the position of your own team, but not only that, but like understanding how your team's going to kill someone. Do you have a Raynor who's going to keep shooting and just do consistent damage, or do you have a KT where you're going to make sure you land that good stun so he can land his combos and things like that? So whether his cooldowns are more important or just whether or not he's there is more important. Like having a good knowledge of surrounding.
That's a very good point on also your stuns, like how you're using them. Because in a sustained comp, an ETC just knocks people back and saves its Q to get the stun off to get the final kill or something like that. Whereas against when you've got a Kalthas or Kel'Thuzad or something like that, that you're just blowing someone up, you want to get that initial stun. So it's like the opposite, because you'd lead with the Q, let your team follow up, and then just knock them back with the W once the kills happen.
Yeah. Same thing can be played so many different ways based on your own composition. So knowledge is power.
On the flip side, what are some of those things that you see a lot in those lower ELOs that you probably shouldn't be doing in regard to setting up? So you mentioned going in like without your team there to follow up, so you're wasting all your cooldowns, and then you've got no team to follow up on the kill. What other things can you think of that you can find probably lower ELO players that will just blow a cooldown or engage at the wrong time?
It's not the same as going in without your team, but a lot of times when I'm playing assassin versus low level tanks, they position really far forward, which means I can freely hit them without there being any threat on me. And before the fight even starts, they've taken a huge amount of damage for no reason, just because they're playing too far forward.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. So we did mention how, like, with anchoring, one hero can be scary, but that's mainly for like rotating and just holding zones. When it comes to like, I guess, team fight front to back in, you don't really want to be like trying to 1v5 threaten them because you're just going to get slapped and take free damage. So yeah, again, super important that you know where your team is, because a Mirrodin's not as scary as a Mirrodin with 5 people right behind him.
Mm.
You're not going to want to go melee that guy.
How important do you think it is in regard to, say you are playing Muradin being one of the more easy, more common tanks that you can play in a lower rank Hero League game? Tend to find a lot of them go, oh, well, I can take as much damage as I want because I can just walk away, pop third wind or second wind or whatever, and I'm back at full health before the team fight breaks out. But at the same time, you find they take so much damage that the team fight might come in before they've even had a chance to get all their health back.
Yeah, I was about to say that's good. Going back to knowledge is power. So maybe if the damage of the opposing team is limited, like it's heavily cooldown based, like they have a Jaina or something, and you just took a full combo, and then you go for the fight with while like Blizzard's down or something, it could be good. And like if you have dive assassin, so like they don't have to worry about it because you just took it. But I mean, if you're like, oh, I'll soak all of the Raynor's damage, so my assassins don't have to worry. It's kind of like his damage doesn't stop. You know, he just keeps auto attacking.
Mm.
So that happens a lot actually. It's like I'm
I
soaking
think
damage.
just in general, you should look at your own team's comp and the enemy's comp and try to fit. Like this is before the game, you figure out how you can win a trade easily in the early game. So it might be that you have like a good rotational comp. Let's say you're playing any tank with a CC. All you have to do is you throw out one CC on the enemy team as they're rotating. Then your damage dealers can follow up and throw a combo, and you already win the trade. Like you don't have to do that much a lot of the time to actually get small advantages.
That is the other thing. Genuinely, sometimes just throwing your stun out and then running away is a really good strategy, because then they can't hit you, and your damage doers get their damage off, and then they rotate as well. You don't necessarily even need to get the kill in a lot of cases. You can leave them on 1 HP, and they're going to be gone from the game for the next 20, 30 seconds while they're back. And that's really good, especially in the early game when you just get full map advantage, being able to rotate and do whatever you want on the map. Even later in the game, getting someone to back so then you can grab a camp is pretty big.
Yeah, we were talking about some of the ways to set up kills and plays and fights and things like that. Some of the things we talked about in regard to not doing, wasting your mana, wasting your cooldowns, taking a lot of damage. Not chasing was a big one, but we haven't really gone too much into that. In lower rank games, I tend to see a lot of the time where an Anubarak will use his burrow to engage into a team fight or to try to chase down an enemy, and then they just get turned on and get blown up because the rest of the team can't follow them. Or a Muradin that will use his jump to get in, but then can't get out because he hasn't got an escape path. What are some things you guys could recommend in this sort of situation?
I think sometimes it is okay to chase. It's just like I said before, it's all just game knowledge. Like you just have to build up your knowledge of like when you can do things, when you can't. And I think a big mistake that people make at lower ranks is kind of staggering out, like not just in terms of chasing, but just in terms of their health and mana. They kind of stick around when really you can just be more efficient and actually reset and go back to full. So a lot of the time you'll see lower rank tanks chasing with basically no mana, and then the whole team also probably has depleted mana, and they have to follow the tank, or the tank will probably die. So in a lot of cases, you're better off just resetting completely and letting your team reset, and then going back to an objective or camps or whatever.
Do you think just how you mentioned with the use of the word staggering some of their health and mana, that could also be referred to with ability cooldowns? So for example, if you see say you have a Mirrodin and a Li Ming does her QW and then Mirrodin, and then it hits and then or misses whatever, and then Mirrodin stuns maybe a second after. Do you think that maybe it could have been more worth to save the stun a little bit or try and stun earlier when Li Ming has her abilities? Like just that kind of connection's always better to have than not.
It really it can depend if you've got someone else that can follow up on the team. Sometimes you can still have a pretty decent trade, but like Li Ming especially, she's got 4 seconds or something on her queue, but the W's like 8, 9 seconds, something ridiculous. So unless you can get good value with a queue, which comes up in 3 seconds, which you should wait for, then you're just better off waiting the full time for your teammates' cooldowns to come back.
Yeah.
Here is like Kalthus as well, like really high cooldown skills that there's just no point wasting your stuns on unless you need to use it to save one of your teammates or something.
Yeah.
The other thing for chasing kills is the main point most of the time will be to get an objective or something like that. Usually when you're team fighting as 5-man, you'll be going for an objective like that Infernal Shrine game. And the main point will be to try and get that objective. So as much as getting 4 or 5 kills would be amazing, all you really need is one. Once you've got that one kill, you should be able to get the objective if your team stays high health and mana. So
That's actually a good point. So like with chasing, going back to Blank's one as well, maybe just understanding that, say you're Muradin, you've dived their Kael'thas, he's low HP, and you're just chasing after him trying to kill him. Maybe understanding that him being on 1 HP he's basically already out of the fight anyway. There's no point chasing. Maybe your presence could be better use elsewhere rather than in their spawn. Things like that could be important to keep an eye out as well.
Yeah, well,
As
the
it
other
comes
thing
back to
about the chasing scenario is because they're chasing. Say you're running a solo tank situation. If your tank's chasing, there's no one to peel for your backline. And if you've got someone like an Illidan or a Valera or someone like that we had in this game here, chasing down your backline, the tank's chasing another hero while your team's getting absolutely destroyed in the back.
yeah, if you've got like Kalthus and Kel'Thuzad or something like that, like these champs that rely on cooldowns, mages in general always just rely on cooldowns. They can't do anything to someone like Illidan that's just going to jump around, dodge their skills, and then kill the whole team. They could 1v5 Sonya as well. She's just too much of a pain for the rest of your team to be aware of. So you need to know that before the game starts, as Rob was saying. You need to check what their team is capable of, who can 1v4 the rest of your team. Because even if you're distracting 4 of their team, if the one person that isn't distracted can kill your whole team, there's no point.
This is another team fight, sorry, that I've just put up there now. I'm an idiot and didn't actually make it loop that time, but this one in particular, it's just the start of a team fight. The tanks have both gone all the way in. The way the team split is okay, I think, and it was really good use of a combination of abilities and cooldowns and stuff like that. But at the same time, I think Sylvanas was a bit out of position, so she got ganked in the backline there by Valera because the tanks were so far up. Would you recommend in that circumstance? Because you can see the tanks are both in the same spot. And yes, they're getting the kill on like the Morales, or getting to the Morales, but now the backline down where Sylvanas, KT and stuff are, there's no peel there.
I think if I'm playing tank in HL against a Kel'Thuzad, I basically just dive him the whole game because like I don't trust my teammates to not get hit by a Kel'Thuzad combo and die. So I want to get in his face and not let him have space to work. Because I just think a hero like that will probably pop off if you allow him any space.
I think maybe the biggest point, I guess, we're just really hitting home is understanding compositions is like everything for your composition, their composition, what your role is, what you need to be doing. I think that's one we can definitely keep hammering home. That's pretty important.
The next couple of points we have on here is talking about leading and teamfight priority. If we go with teamfight priority first in this situation, we can use this video to show the priority that the tanks and the team itself have on the hero. We mentioned before they were taking on the Morales. What would you talk about in regard to teamfight priority as a tank?
So especially tanks that don't have mobility like Arthas, you really need to make sure you're on the right target. and you just stick to them because you can't get off that target. Like in this case, Arthas goes on morales. If that was a ETC that he went on instead of the morales, he wouldn't be able to get past the ETC ever. He's just got no way to do it. He'd just have to keep hitting the ETC, which is why a hero like Arthas tries to get the flank, and in this case he must have because he got the morales. So by sticking on the morales and just staying there permanently, he's doing a fantastic job. But a hero like Muradin, who has mobility, can get his stun in, get his slow, do the damage, and then you still have to try and keep an eye on your backline and jump back and help your team if they need it as well.
Because that does go like goes back to like what Rob just said about playing into the KT. Like if no one else can stop his combos, and if anyone does get hit by a combo, the fight's lost. It's like, well, Rob, make sure he's the closest target and make sure he doesn't get his combo off. I guess maybe like tank play into Garrosh as well. If you're a safe tank like Muradin, you probably want to make sure you're like the closest target to the enemy Garrosh at all times. So he always has a hard time throwing someone, and if it's you, it's the best person on your team to be thrown, right? So
Sometimes you even want to be thrown if you're playing one of
That's
those low mobility tanks like Arthas or Johanna. You want to be in the back line, and if Garsh just throws you in there, he's doing your job for you.
Some of the less obvious ones are like Alarak as well. If Alarak silences a Muradin, he doesn't particularly care because 3 seconds later he'll have his he'll still be alive in 3 seconds. So like it doesn't matter that he's been silenced. But if a silence is used on a Kalthus or a Tassadar, they're screwed. So trying to get those skills used on you and then engage is usually preferable. Well, pretty much always preferable if you can.
I know that we always think that the healer is the one you want to be going for as a first priority in a team fight. I've seen too many times where a tank or not a tank per se, but a team is afraid to focus down the damage of an enemy tank. So if you've got a tank that's pushing in like an ETC or something like that, if you focus that target, they're not that hard to kill. But I see too many teams going, oh, no, ignore the tank, jump over the tank and go for a healer or something like that instead. What are your thoughts?
I think that's definitely not always the case. So like you're saying, if you can obviously tell that the opposing tank isn't being too, I guess, respectful about your comp or his team's own comp, as well as positioning, as in, remember how a Muradin is scarier when there's one Muradin and 4 people right behind him. If you can obviously tell he's pushing up by himself, it's still good to try and kill them because they're not impossible to kill, but they are sometimes like the hardest ones. So it's always good to make sure you can distinguish between, like, say, you're playing into an ETC who's been super aggressive and you're a Muradin, like being able to make the decision that you should stun this ETC instead of maybe trying to dive someone because you can win the fight right there, and then by stunning and killing that ETC. Just, I guess that one, things like that would more so come with maybe experience, with judging damage, health, things like that in certain situations. That would probably be one of the harder ones
most of the time the enemy tank is your best target, so you shouldn't listen to people who say like don't focus the tank, because I think just for snowballing the start of a fight, typically you damage the enemy tank, you get a good trade on him, and then he has to back off a bit, and then you'll have a freer path to their backline, and then so either you kill or outtrade the enemy tank, and then from there the fight can just snowball itself a lot of the time.
Yeah. The other thing with the tank role is leading, because as a tank, you mentioned, Rob, at the very start that it's pretty much the carry hero. You dictate the pace of the fights, you dictate the way the fights happen and where they happen, when they happen. How important is it as a tank to be leading those sorts of things?
Well, especially on rotational maps, like maps where you spend the first 5 minutes of the game just rotating between lanes, like you are the leader. Your team can't really do anything without you. Like if you trade well on the enemy team, then you can just rotate aggressively through kind of their path, and then you stop them from doing anything. You get ahead on XP. So, yeah, you are the guy that has to lead the team. And like, I don't know, I'll probably repeat myself a lot, but like, it is all just game knowledge. Like, you just need to practice and like be very analytical about what you're doing and try to improve that way.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time you'll see a solo lane player or something who might, in a Hero League game, have the highest rank or something in the game. Because we've got voice comms now, they'll think that it's their role to be the shot caller. I think that anyone other than the tank shouldn't really be shot calling, aside from maybe your main assassin or even your support, because your tank's got to manage those cooldowns. They're the ones that make those plays. And if you've got someone in a solo lane trying to call shots, they're not able to watch the game, or if they are, they're not paying enough attention on their own game.
The thing about shot calling is a lot of the time it's just pointing out what can be done on the map for your team. So like camps that are available, like which order you're doing camps, what lane might be available to push, and all that sort of stuff you can point out to your team at pretty much any time. And most of the time, it's at least helpful if they haven't seen it already. But there is a limit to how much people are willing to even listen to you, even if you did try and spout out as much as you want. Because generally speaking, we're all thinking the same thing. Like on Tomb of the Spider Queen, you rotate between two lanes pretty much all the time when you can.
Yeah.
So if someone is just trying to come that they're rotating, it's just like pointless.
Well, duh.
And it's like, as much as mentioning it at the beginning of the game, maybe in lower levels, might help your team in terms of some people might not actually know that. But once it's been mentioned once, if you keep mentioning it, all you're doing is pissing off your team. Just basic game knowledge is just going to annoy people if you just keep repeating it over and over.
I guess maybe what we can bring up then is as a way to fix that, like effective communication as a tank. So for me, I really like it when tanks either tell me they have a stun or that they're looking. For example, say if they're playing Stitches, they're like, I'm going to be over here, I'm looking for a hook, like I'm looking for something. Because it gives you like an extra half a second to be like, oh, I don't have my damage, so it's not worth it. Or I do have my damage, let's go for it. Same with stuns, maybe engages as well. And then out of respect, on the flip side, things tanks probably, I guess, maybe like to hear. Rob and Magic could answer this better than me, but like if an assassin's like, I do have my damage, or Hanzo's like, I have my arrow, or, you know, a healer's like, I got your back, or something like that to make a play.
Sometimes hearing like a Malfurion's got his heal or Stukov's got his D, like that sort of stuff, if you're in comms, feel free to mention it. It's amazing to know Stukov's still got his D up, because if you try and harass someone and he doesn't have his heal, and you're someone like, trying to think of someone that doesn't heal, but anyone that doesn't heal needs the healer to be healing them. So if you do a trade and your healer doesn't have his heal up, like Stukov's D, which has a high cooldown, it'd be a serious problem. And sometimes it is hard to pay attention to when your healer does have that heal. And likewise, it's the same with long cooldowns, for sure. Mentioning that to the tank, I don't have my chain, let's say, if you're Kel'Thuzad, is pretty big, because you've got nothing in this fight. And if the Muradin doesn't know that Kel'Thuzad's used his chain, then when he stuns, it's just a complete waste of a skill most of the time.
And then do you think then, Rob, going back to what you were mentioning about how sometimes maybe targeting the enemy tanks, the best way to start the fight, to start a snowballing with good communication, like your support saying he has his heal for you, you can make that HP trade because you know you have the support, right? Would that be like
Yeah,
good
I
communication?
think in general it's good for the support to be proactive in the way they call. So especially with the direction that support's going, like if you have something like Decade, then the support can actually be like a more proactive player, I guess, in like a fight. So he can do a combo, and then like you can be the one following up. Or like Tyrande, for example, it's good to know like her amount of heals and her cooldowns, because obviously if she's got like a cleanse at 1 and she's got 2 of them, then obviously like even if you're diving into CC, then you're probably pretty safe if she can heal you twice and like cleanse 2 things and follow up as well with E.
Yeah.
A lot of meta supports right now do have ways to, in one way or another, engage. You have things like the Decker Zornado, the White Main route after level 13, things like that, and you just need to follow up with your own skill shots based CC. And then it makes it much easier for you to get in there without being knocked back or taking all the damage.
Hmm. I mean, in regard to skill shots, and cooldowns and stuff like that as well, something Ultivian, sorry, not Ultivian, Ultimatrium in chat mentioned earlier was he gets really annoyed when he's playing someone like Chromie or another tank and then another assassin, and then Diablo or Garrosh are constantly moving them out of your skill shots. Is that just comes back down to game knowledge and self skill, right?
Yeah, I mean, being aware of your surroundings, right? Like, if you can see that, say, I don't know, it's really common with mages because they're the most, skill shot reliant. So, say, for example, the Kael'thas is coming up and looking to try and do his, like, knock up combo, and you, as Garrosh, throw the enemy the other direction by accident. Being aware that my KT's stepping up, he's not stepping up to int, he's obviously looking to do something here.
Yeah.
Maybe if I just throw him up and down on the spot to help him keep him still or something would be better. It's not always like the best thing to go for the super throwback or something like that, maybe.
You can also communicate right at the beginning of the game what you should be trying to do with your comp. So at Diablo and Kael'thas, I've seen, Kel'Thuzad, I'll say, because that happens even more. Quite often, they don't interact very well when I've seen it in Hero League. Like a Diablo will charge after Kel'Thuzad uses his first chain, and then the second chain just goes
nowhere
randomly. Even if it connects, it's at a different position, so Kel'Thuzad's damage can't get on it. So you need to be aware of what your comp's capable of doing, just like we've mentioned a few times already. But you can communicate it right at the beginning. So maybe after, if Kel'Thuzad doesn't have a chain, just tell him to wait for Diablo to do his combo, and then do it where you flip back, get Kel'Thuzad to use his chain then. And if Kel'Thuzad's got a chain, even just one chain on anybody, then just don't charge. And interactions like that can be calmed at the very beginning of the game, so then you never interrupt anybody.
Yeah.
I think in general, when you have displacement, it's just good to be consistent. So like, say you're playing Diablo with Tehran, just make sure to just QE every time. Just keep it consistent, and that like they'll know what to do. They'll adjust to it. If they don't at first, then they'll figure it out during the game.
Like how
And
at
if you
the
need to, you can
start,
just tell them.
Yeah.
that's it. But like how at the start on that first fight we watched, where I was like, the tanks are moving kind of sporadic, and sure, it's harder for the enemy to predict where they're going, but it's also like impossible for your team to predict where you're going as well. So if you queue as Diablo 50% of the time into a wall and don't flip, and then you flip the other 50%, your team's going to be kind of confused. So consistency is always good in that respect, dude.
We've pretty much gone over all our points, and we are running a little bit over time. But before we wrap up, which tanks? We'll talk about what tanks to choose comp map wise, sort of in regard to lower elo Hero League games that are going to be easier to play, probably easier to help your team. You're the professionals. What would you recommend?
Who do you carry with, Rob?
Who do you carry with?
Who's your tilt pick? Who's your tilt pick?
I'd say my carry pick at the moment is Arthas, just because he's so he just gets into people's faces. Like you don't have to worry so much about cooldowns because you've got a constantly ticking AOE slow. So with Arthas, I guess all you really have to do is like know how to path and like walk into the right places basically, and not get yourself too bursted, I guess, and then you'll always be a consistent factor in fights. But I think just in general, like there's no one pick that's necessarily like, you should play this if you're learning to tank. Like I think at the end of the day, like HOTS is a game, and you play it for fun. So like if you want to learn tank, just find what is the most fun hero for you, or like fun heroes, and then just really going to games like being very analytical and like constantly thinking like, what am I doing right? Like, what could I improve on here? And then just grind, I guess. Like, play a lot of games, and you will improve. Like, it's not too hard. You just keep an open mind in a MOBA and grind, and like it's a sure path to improvement most of the time.
Such a wholesome answer.
There are definitely some tanks which are
I
easier
was
to
gonna
play.
say, yeah.
The lower heroes,
Yeah.
like Garrosh is the one that comes to mind. He's pretty tanky. He's really good at punishing the other team for not checking the bushes, for walking up too far, that sort of thing. The one thing you would have to be careful is not to overextend and run into their team, as we talked about before, looking to get the game-winning throw, as you'll just end up split from your team and taking too much damage.
I mean, some of the other heroes, tanks rather, that I find in lower ranks at least are easier to play are your Muradins and your Joannas, because they've got a lot of sustain, they can take a lot of damage, and they can easily set up plays and help with your team initiation for team fights, peeling for disengages and stuff like that. So, I mean, I find Joanna, I don't know about ETC, he does seem like he's a little bit squishier and has a little bit more skill required for him, but as a newer tank player, I think like Joanna Muradin, would you recommend or say that I'm wrong?
Yeah, for sure.
I think one
Yes, I'm
really good
wrong.
thing with Mirrodin is that with Mirrodin you have to learn how to body block a lot. Like a lot of his power is jumping behind someone and then not letting them walk past him. So I think like that is a good learner hero from that perspective. Like it's a very pure tank, I guess, like kind of an
Muradin's always been known for his all-round ability. He's not. There's for most things, there's a tank that does it slightly better, like ETC will peel better. Johanna's got unstoppable. Like most tanks have something that they can do better, but Muradin can do everything fairly well.
Mm.
So
Remember when he
he's
used to stun on his auto attack? Busted.
Oh, Skullcracker.
Nah, in his ultimate, in his avatar, he would mini stun on his auto attack.
That was
Oh,
good
that was
days.
broken. But would you say those 5 tanks would be probably your good go-to starter tanks if you're trying to learn in lower ELOs and do better and help your team climb and get out of the lower
for
ranks?
sure, but just beware of what they can and can't do. Like ETC, low health pool, so you can't just run in there and expect to survive. Same with Anubarak. Like you need to find their strengths and their weaknesses in order to improve, and just keep an open mind, like Rob was saying, and you'll get there.
Get the idea, yeah. What about like you mentioned Anubarak, and what about Diablo? I find that he can be a little bit of a hit and miss if you're not as skilled with him.
The problem I have with Diablo is that when you do get behind, the level difference in terms of stats makes him very hard to survive. So like if even just like a 2 level difference, 8% health, because all he's really got is his high health pool, and all his healing is from percent heal from his 1, basically. It becomes very hard for him to survive if he goes deep and is someone that charges in there. So it's hard to survive, but at the same time, I personally find I carry with it quite well in Hero League.
I mean, if you know how to play any hero can be good, and it goes back to sort of what we were talking about last week with the communication and playing your comfort picks, things that you know how to play. You're always going to be able to perform better on a hero you know how to play, rather than trying to fill that meta of, oh, ETC is really strong right now, but I have no idea how to play him, but I'll pick him because he's good, right?
That's it. That's definitely true.
Make sure you have fun with whatever hero you play. That's definitely a big point.
Oh, something that I didn't put in the notes, but I wanted to mention and ask you guys while we're doing it, because we've had a lot of times where people are asking, oh, how best can I learn how to tank? And there have been mixed thoughts about it. Oh, play many different tanks as often as you can so that you can find out all of their different abilities and stuff. I tend to have the idea that you pick a tank and just one trick it until you know how to play it back to front. What would you recommend?
Well, you need to. If you keep playing heroes that you enjoy, and you probably won't enjoy every tank, so I'd say 2 or 3 tanks that you enjoy, only play them. If you only like 2 tanks, only play those 2 tanks.
I
Like,
think that can almost be a point because maybe like a 70-30 split with a main pick and an off pick because some things do translate as in because it's all the same kind of role, but probably spamming one here it might make you a little clueless to your surroundings, as in you may not have a good understanding of the opposing tank, what they can do and stuff like that if you haven't actually get your hands on it yet, right? So I think it's good to try everything, but it's always good to have a main, right? Like the fallback because skills do translate. So
everyone, even in the higher leagues, what like low to high elo, everybody has a hero that they just love the most.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, and they'll generally speaking try and get that hero. So it's definitely not a bad thing, especially because you tend to notice more stuff on these heroes because you've played more games in it. You've already seen the scenarios before, and so you just automatically do everything. And that's 100% a good thing that is invaluable in a game.
I'd say focusing on a couple tanks would be a good thing to do, especially ones that play somewhat similar to each other. Because then that's when it more easily carries from one tank to the other.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I also wouldn't play one tank because in that case it can be easily just banned or taken by the other team, and then you're left clueless and don't really know how to play any other tanks.
That's also, especially in minor regions, that's a very serious threat because you tend to play the same people over and over again.
Exactly. Everyone's in the ANZ chat, you know when people get into games. So if you're just a one-trick Arthas, say, for example, then they can just ban Arthas. And you're left looking clueless. Even if you are really, really good at Arthas.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap it up there. We usually do have a audience Q&A, so if you guys have any questions that are watching right now, please feel free to ask them. And while we're doing that, Rob, devastated that you couldn't get some success at BlizzCon.
I had success in Crucible. That's enough for me this year. I'm fine with that.
How's it been with the new team?
Oh, it's been alright. Like they're all pretty nice people, and we're sponsored, so yeah, I can't really complain.
How does it feel to be a back-to-back Crucible champ?
It feels good, man. At least I've won 2 championships this year, so I'm okay.
I think that's probably a meme question, but is Tank Abathur a viable strategy?
Get that hat monstrosity going in.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose with a monstrosity at high stacks, they can be pretty tanky.
It's not a hero.
No.
So work on it.
What's the stand on body blocking? When do you stop attacking and just move into the way?
I'd look to just be stutter stepping most of the time. You don't need to commit to one or the other. Obviously, if you're stutter stepping, you're not moving fully as much as you could if you're just moving, but there's no reason not to be weaving in all the attacks, generally speaking.
It also depends on movement speed, because like Muradin has a slow, and when they're slowed by 25%, it's very easy to auto attack and body block them pretty much perfectly. So it's something that hero specifically can do amazingly at nearly all stages, just because of that movement speed slow. The same with buffs to your movement speed that could be granted by maybe Ethereal. Stuff like that can just make it really easy to do both. But if you're forced to do one or the other, quite often body blocking will give you more success because the ones that really do damage are the Jimmy behind you or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Maybe it comes down a bit more to awareness. It's like, well, is me going to half body block and auto attack kill this guy, or should I maybe just make sure this guy's like pseudo stunned until my DPS gets here or something? So you just got to make that call, make that judgment call.
What else we got? How would I go about playing the big tuna kahuna as a tank? I don't know what that means.
That's Murky.
Murky.
Maybe in Murky?
Yeah, unfortunately, Murky doesn't quite have the health pool, even with that, to be a tank.
I don't know. His bulk is well annoying.
The biggest problem with Big Tuna Kahuna is you have to play 19 levels with Murky.
Yeah.
Wouldn't recommend.
Would not recommend. Oh, well, we'll wrap it up there. I think the questions are probably getting a bit memey now. Thank you guys very much for joining us again. Thank you, big thanks, big shout out to Rob. Anything you want to say before we head off? Robert Ober?
I want to give a shout out to Quality since you requested it. So,
What a lad.
hi, Quality.
Well, it's been good
Very
having you on the
sweet
show.
senpai.
We miss you here in ANZ. Oltivian's really glad that you're gone because it means that's one less player he has to contest with in ANZ Premier Division.
Oh, I actually I mentioned this off stream yesterday. I was like, well, if both Ben and Rio also go to NA, I'll slowly be like, you know how when the Australian speed skater, won the gold medal because everyone fell down in front of him. I was like, man, I'll eventually go to a land just by staying here. So
Just gotta play dead
That's it.
lane,
Just
get a
gotta bide
game
my
until
time.
everyone quits.
I'm
Excellent.
still young, heart still beating. I'm getting there, boys.
Yeah, well, again, thank you so much. You're up really early, and really appreciate you joining us today or tonight. Today for you. Next week's episode, we're going to be talking about the support role. I'm not too sure. I think we've got Coffee, who's not going to be here next week. Sorry to say, because you'll be in BlizzCon, right?
Yes, I'll be just heading back from BlizzCon.
Yeah, Eli doesn't like
arriving
that.
that evening. Don't particularly. It'll probably be a bit too tired to come on the show.
That's all right. But we'll be talking about the support role and things to keep an eye out for there. Massive thanks to you guys for watching us. And for those watching YouTube, please click that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitch, Twitter, everything like that. You can see the Twitter handles of these lovely lads underneath their heads. Feel free to give them all a follow as well. They're very active in social media most of the time. And I'm pretty sure they're all open to DMs. So if anyone has any questions for these amazing players, you're more than welcome to shoot them a message. I've dobbed you in, guys. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
But until next time, we'll see you in the Nexus.